Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the ranking member, Mr. Raskin from Maryland, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Mayor Bowser, I want to thank you for immediately deploying the Metropolitan Police Department on January 6, 2021 to come and defend us against the violent insurrection that took place. You sent hundreds of officers who stood shoulder to shoulder with the Capitol Police, and we know many of them were injured in the process, suffering terrible injuries and were hospitalized because of it. And some DC police officers came who weren't even on duty, like Michael Fanone, famously, who came just because he heard about it on the news and was nearly killed that day. He had to beg for his life. So thanks to you and Chief, to you and your officers for everything you did to defend democracy on that day. Now, Mayor Bowser, you didn't hesitate to voluntarily deploy the Metropolitan Police Department to help us out. And you didn't hesitate to do it even though there are people who are determined to keep DC from achieving its political equality within the union by being admitted to statehood. Why did you do that?
Listen, we are, Congressman, we're proud to support all manners of federal operations in the District of Columbia. We sometimes get reimbursed for it. We sometimes don't. And we've seen over the years those security dollars that are available go down and down. There are First Amendment activities, and I'll ask the Chief to chime in here, almost every day, where MPD is working hand in hand with federal partners to include the Park Police and the U.S. Capitol Police, less because there tend to be fewer demonstrations. But they work hand in hand every day to make the city safe. And we're going to be there to be supportive of the federal government whenever called upon.
Good. Let me pursue this for a second with you. Unlike the Metropolitan Police Department, the DC National Guard was not deployed for several hours after the riots at the Capitol began, despite the fact that they were armed and ready and just a few blocks away. Why didn't you just deploy the DC National Guard?
We requested the DC National Guard to support our activities in and around the city. In a somewhat unusual response, the Department of the Army limited the movements of the Guard to where they could go and required us to request through the Army, the Secretary of the Army, any changes to their deployment. The DC National Guard is somewhat a misnomer because when you're from the states and you have the Maryland National Guard, they report to the governor of Maryland, or in Florida, they report to the government of Florida. The DC National Guard may more accurately be called the President's Guard. The President, through his designee, the Secretary of the Army, deploys the DC National Guard.
Right, and we know that President Trump was indifferent and passive for at least 3 hours before the National Guard were finally released. If DC were to become a state, the governor, the new executive of the state, would have control over the National Guard. But the House of Representatives in the last session actually voted not just for DC statehood, but also separately in different legislation to give the mayor control over the DC National Guard after we were just taught this object lesson in what it means to have a president who doesn't have the best interests of the country at heart controlling the National Guard. It was blocked in the Senate by Republicans. Would you have deployed the Guard immediately to the Capitol?
We certainly would have moved the Guard that were already in the district. We think, and I'll ask the Chief to remind me of the number of Guardsmen and women who are already deployed who could have gotten here in minutes. Because that wasn't happening, we facilitated conversations with the Department of the Army to make sure that the plea of the U.S. Capitol Police Chief was being met.
Good. All right, I've got one other question for you. There's been an effort, I think, to drive a wedge between you and the DC Council. I can't think of a mayor in America who doesn't have differences, policy disagreements with his or her council, just like governors and state legislatures and so on. Does the mayor of DC and the DC Council, do they stand united in defense of democratic self-government in DC and also for the statehood petition?
Absolutely, 100%. Members of the council have been supportive of our efforts, the Congresswoman's efforts, and countless dozens of local groups who have advanced DC statehood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.